The sun was setting as I stood at the edge of the town. The air was thick with the weight of memories I had buried for 12 years. In the distance, I could see the familiar rooftops of the houses, the ones I had left behind. My heart was heavier now than it had ever been before, and as the wind blew across my face, it carried with it whispers of the past. I had been gone for so long, hiding in the shadows, trying to forget what had happened. But now, I had returned. I took a deep breath and stepped forward, the ground beneath my feet a constant reminder of the life I once had. My name is Justin, and I came back for one reason, to face the truth of what had been buried in silence for 12 years. It had been 12 years since I vanished without a trace. At that time, I had everything: family, love, a home. I was married to Roseline, the woman I thought was my soulmate. But that was before I found out the truth. One evening, as I returned home earlier than usual, I caught her in our matrimonial bed, in the arms of another man, someone I called brother. My world shattered in that moment. Steve, my friend and brother, stood up and ran out. My wife sat there on the bed, naked with only the bedsheet covering her lower part, with shock written all over her face as she never expected me to be back that soon. I didn't confront her. I couldn't. I just left. Without a word, I walked out of the life I had built, leaving behind the woman I had once trusted with my heart. The days that followed were full of confusion and pain. I wandered through cities, taking on different jobs, hiding my face, burying my past. I didn't want to face anyone from the city, not after what happened. But there came a time when the silence grew unbearable. The pain of the betrayal turned into something else: anger, then thirst for revenge. I traveled from place to place, never staying in one spot for too long. I had to heal, or at least pretend to. I found peace in the routine of everyday life, working in fields, doing odd jobs, living a life stripped of the complexities I once knew. But the past always came back to haunt me. I thought of Roseline, of the lies she had told me, and it pushed me forward, closer to my purpose. In those quiet moments, when the world was still, I could almost hear her voice calling my name, asking for forgiveness. But I knew better now. Forgiveness wasn't something I could give so easily. It would take more than an apology. It wasn't until one fateful day that I decided I had waited long enough. I had come across news from home. Roseline had remarried, had children of her own, and was living a life that was untouched by the pain she had caused me. The news hit me hard, and for the first time in years, I felt the need to confront the ghost of my past. I made up my mind. I was going back to Abuja, not for reconciliation, but for closure. I had to see the people who had betrayed me with my own eyes, and I had to know what became of the life I had left behind. I arrived at Lugbe at dusk, the sky painted in shades of orange and purple. It looked different, yet familiar. The faces I once knew had aged, but they still wore the same expressions. Some greeted me, their voices full of curiosity and surprise. But I had no interest in small talk. I was here for one thing. I walked straight to Rosaline's house. Her husband, the man who had replaced me, was sitting outside, chatting with some of the neighbors in the estate where they lived. Roseline appeared at the door, her eyes locking with mine. There was no apology in her gaze, no remorse. She had moved on, and I wasn't sure if that hurt more than the betrayal itself. "You're back," she said, her voice steady but betraying the hint of something deeper. "Yes, I'm back," I replied, my voice calm despite the storm raging within me. "And I want answers." Roseline stepped aside, motioning for me to come inside. I followed her into the house, where everything seemed so normal. But when I saw the children, all sitting around a table, eating, they looked up at me with confusion, but Roseline didn't say anything to them. Instead, she motioned for me to sit down. I objected and told her I would rather sit with the guests outside. The conversation that followed was short but loaded with emotion. Roseline admitted to everything: the affair, the lies, and the coldness with which she had pushed me aside. She spoke of how she had convinced herself that I would never return, that I would never find out the truth. She told me about her life with her new husband, about the children they had together, and how she had tried to move on. But I wasn't interested in hearing about her new life. I wanted to know why. Why had she done it? Why had she destroyed everything we had? I was young, she said, her voice trembling now. I didn't understand what I had until it was too late. I didn't respond. What was there to say? She had made her choice. I had made mine. There was no going back. As the days passed, I felt the anger inside me grow. I had returned to confront my past, to seek justice, but now I wasn't sure if revenge was what I truly wanted. The years of anger had built up inside me, but as I watched Roseline with her new family, I realized that nothing could bring back what we once had. There was nothing left here for me anymore, no matter how much the past tried to pull me back. Living in Abuja again felt like stepping into the unknown. I had no plans, no direction, just a need to keep moving, to stay away from the memories that had weighed me down for so long. My footsteps echoed in the quiet streets as I made my way to the bus station. There was nothing left for me there. No family, no friends. The life I had once built was nothing but dust now, blown away by time and betrayal. As I boarded the bus, I realized that this journey wasn't just about physical distance. It was about distancing myself from the anger that had been festering in my heart. Every mile I traveled, I could feel a little bit of the weight lifting. It wasn't easy, and the pain was still there, but it was less sharp. I didn't know where I was headed, only that I needed to leave everything behind. I found myself in a small town several days later, a place that felt worlds away from the city. It was peaceful here, quiet, just what I needed. I took up work in a local market, selling fruits and vegetables. The simplicity of the life was grounding. It allowed me to be alone with my thoughts without the constant reminders of the past. Still, there were nights when the silence was too much to bear. I would lie awake, the faces of my past haunting me. Roseline, her smile, the way she used to look at me with love. But that love had been a lie. And now, it was too late for regrets. I spent the next few years keeping myself busy with work, building a life from the ground up, piece by piece. I had no interest in relationships. I didn't trust anyone, and the thought of opening myself up to someone else felt impossible. Every time I thought of Roseline, of how she had moved on, I was reminded of why I couldn't love again. The world moved on without me, and I learned to accept that. I had been in the town for almost 5 years when I saw him. It was a morning like any other. I was at the market, arranging my fruits, when I saw a familiar face in the crowd. It was my old friend, Chuka. We hadn't spoken since I left the village all those years ago. Just then, he called, his face lighting up with surprise. I froze for a moment. I hadn't expected to see anyone from the past, let alone someone who knew everything. Chuka walked over, his face full of questions, but before he could ask, I spoke. "I'm fine," I said. "I've moved on. I don't want to talk about it." Chuka looked at me for a moment, then nodded. "I understand. There's something you need to hear. About Rose." I felt my heart stop. "What about her?" "She's been asking about you. All these years. Wondering if you'd ever come back again." I didn't respond. I didn't need to hear it. The truth was clear to me. She had moved on. So had I. There was no point in revisiting the past. "I'm done with her, Chuka. I'm done with all of it." Chuka nodded, his eyes filled with pity. I could tell he wanted to say more, but he respected my wishes. He left the market shortly after, and I went back to my work, trying to ignore the growing lump in my throat. As the years passed, I found peace in the simple things. I had built a new life, away from the shadows of my past. But every now and then, the memories would return. The day I found out about the affair, the day I left everything behind. It was as if the wound had never fully healed. The scars were still there, even if they weren't visible. But I was learning to live with it. I had learned that forgiveness was not always possible, that some wounds would never fully close. I had tried to find peace, and maybe that was enough. I couldn't change what had happened, but I could control what came next. And that was something I would hold on to. One day, a letter arrived. I didn't recognize the handwriting, but there was no mistaking the return address. It was from Rosaline's family. My heart sank as I ripped it open. Justin. Roseline has been asking about you. She is ill, and the doctors have said that she doesn't have long. She regrets everything, and her heart aches for the pain she caused you. She wants to see you before it's too late. Please, for the sake of old times, will you come? Yours. Ojeki, Rosaline's sister. The letter felt like a punch. I had walked away from the hurt, from everything that tied me to that life. But now, it seemed the past had come knocking again. I sat there for hours, the letter in my hands, unsure of what to do. Should I go? Should I confront her one last time? In the end, I decided to visit. Not for her, but for myself. To close the door once and for all. It was a rainy day when I made the journey back to Abuja. The roads were wet, the sky overcast with dark clouds. I didn't know what to expect. Would Roseline be the same woman I had once known? Or had time worn away the person I had loved? I arrived at her family's house in the late afternoon. The small compound looked much the same, though the paint on the walls had faded and the garden was overgrown with weeds. I knocked on the door, and Ojeki opened it. You came, she said, her voice full of relief. I nodded, stepping inside. The air was heavy with the scent of medicine and faint incense. Roseline was lying in a bed, her face pale and thin, a shadow of the vibrant woman I once knew. She looked at me with wide eyes, as if unsure I was real. Justin, her voice was weak, but the emotion behind it was unmistakable. Roseline, I said, my voice betraying none of the emotions I felt. I had prepared myself for this moment, but seeing her like this made something inside me shift. She reached out a trembling hand. I am so sorry. I never meant to hurt you. Please, forgive me. I looked at her hand, then at her face, but I said nothing. What was there left to say? The years between us had erased any possibility of reconciliation. She had made her choice long ago, and now it was too late. What you did, what we had, it's over. It was over long ago. I replied. Her eyes welled up with tears. I was selfish. I didn't understand what I had until I lost it. But now I know. I was wrong. The words came too easily for her now, but I knew they were just that, words. They didn't undo the years of pain. They didn't bring back the man I had been before everything fell apart. And they certainly didn't bring back the trust that had been shattered beyond repair. I don't need your regret, Roseline, I said, my voice firm. What I needed was your truth back then. But you never gave it to me. She broke down, sobbing, her body shaking with the weight of her sorrow. I watched her for a moment, but there was no feeling left in me. No anger, no sadness, just emptiness. I had forgiven her a long time ago, because forgiveness was something I had done for myself. But that didn't mean I could go back to the past. I'm leaving now, I said softly, turning to walk out of the room. Justin, please. Remember your daughter, her voice was barely a whisper, but I didn't turn around. I couldn't. As I walked out of the house, the rain had stopped, and the sky had cleared. The sun was setting, casting an orange glow over the village. It felt like the end of a chapter, but not the end of my story. I had finally faced the woman who had torn my world apart, and I had let go of the last piece of her that still lingered in my heart. It wasn't easy. It wasn't painless. But it was necessary. I had to walk away, not just from her, but from the version of myself that had lived in that past. The person I had been, before betrayal had twisted my soul, was long gone. As I sat by the window of my small apartment, watching the sun set over the city, I realized something important. I had survived. I had lived through it all. Betrayal, heartache, and loss. I had made it to the other side, and I wasn't broken. I didn't return to Abuja again after that day. There was nothing left for me there. Instead, I moved to Georgetown this time, finding work and building a life from the ground up. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. I wasn't running away anymore. I was simply moving forward. And in the quiet moments, when the past would sneak up on me, I would remember that I had the power to choose how my story would end. The bus hissed to a stop in a city far from home. I stepped down with a warm bag and an aching heart. The place was loud, fast, and unfamiliar, perfect for a man trying to disappear all over again. I checked into a cheap guest house and stared at the ceiling all night. No dreams came. Work came in the form of a construction site. Nobody asked questions. That suited me. They called me by a different name, Paul, and I didn't correct them. Maybe it was time to bury Justin for good. Then I met this quiet woman. She worked at the food canteen by the site. Her name was Laura. She was quiet, like me. We never talked beyond what was needed until one day, she handed me my food and asked, "Who are you running from?" I didn't answer, but I knew then that I couldn't stay hidden forever. Over time, I told her small pieces of my story. Not all, just enough to let her know I had been broken. She never judged, never pried. Just listened. It was strange having someone like that around. It scared me more than I expected. With Laura, I started to feel human again. I laughed. I worked harder. I slept better. But there were days the past still clung to my back like wet clothes. She noticed and said one day, "You don't have to forget. You just have to stop punishing yourself." One rainy evening, a letter came. No name, no return address. Just one sentence inside, "You left, but your story didn't." My hands shook. Who sent it? How did they find me? Was it Roseline? Or someone else? I burned the letter but not the questions it raised. I decided I needed to know. Not about Roseline, but about myself. Why had I let one betrayal destroy my entire life? It was time to look inward instead of back. The noise from the construction site couldn't drown out the noise inside me. That letter haunted my every move. I kept wondering who wrote it. Who still cared enough to track me down? The past I tried so hard to bury was resurfacing, clawing at the walls I built around my life. I stopped sleeping. At night, I would sit outside the workers' lodge and stare at the moon like it held answers. Laura noticed the change. One night, she walked over quietly, carrying a flask of hot water and lemon. She sat beside me and didn't say a word for a long time. Finally, she asked, "Do you want to go back?" "No," I replied too quickly. "But I also don't know how to stay." That was the truth. I was a man without a home, without a name I trusted, without a future I believed in. I didn't want Roseline or the life I lost. But I didn't know how to build something new either. One slow afternoon, under a mango tree behind the canteen, Laura shared her own story. "I had a husband once too," she began softly, peeling an orange. "He loved alcohol more than he loved me. The beating started when I told him I was pregnant. He said the child wasn't his. That I was too damaged to carry a child for him. I sat frozen, unsure of what to say. I lost the baby," she continued. "And I lost myself. I ran here, to this place, hoping nobody would remember my name." She turned to me and smiled bitterly. Seems we're both ghosts wearing new faces. It was the first time I felt a deep connection to someone since my return. We were not lovers, not even close friends yet. But we understood each other in a way that silence could not explain. One day at the market, I saw a familiar face. It took seconds for me to recognize him. Ibuka. Rosaline's cousin. He had aged, but I would never forget his face. He didn't see me, thank God. I turned immediately and disappeared into the crowd, my heart pounding. That night, I sat with Laura again. "I saw someone from my past today," I told her. She didn't flinch. "Did they see you?" "No. But it reminded me, there are people I've had too. My daughter. She was just a baby when I left. Laura nodded slowly. Maybe you need to face them, not for them. For yourself. I hated how right she was. I had walked away from the wreckage of my life and assumed silence would heal me. But silence had only buried the truth deeper. And now it was rising. 2 weeks later, I packed my few belongings and told Laura goodbye. It was the hardest goodbye I'd said in years. I don't know what you'll find there, she said, holding my gaze. But I hope you come back home. I don't know what I'm hoping for either, I confessed. Maybe just peace. She didn't hug me. She simply nodded, and that was enough. I boarded the night bus heading back toward Abuja. Arriving in Abuja, I barely recognized the city this time. It had grown, changed. Just like me. I rented a small room on the outskirts. I spent days watching people, memorizing routines. I walked past my old neighborhood but didn't enter. I stood across the street from my former house, staring for hours. The gate was painted blue now. The garden was cleaner. A new car sat in the driveway. Had she moved on this time for real? On my third day of watching, I saw her. A teenage girl in school uniform walked out of the gate, her hair in neat braids. She looked like Roseline but taller, sharper features, my nose. My heart stopped. She laughed as she spoke with the gateman. That laugh, it was my mother's laugh. I knew then. That was my daughter. 15 years of guilt and longing flooded me at once. I had missed her first steps, her first words, her birthdays. I had failed her. And yet, there she was. Alive. Smiling. That evening, I went to the local Catholic church and asked to speak with the priest. It was Father Benedict. An old friend. I had known him in my early days of marriage. He gasped when he saw me. Justin, he asked. You're alive? I nodded. Please, don't tell anyone. Not yet. We sat for hours. I told him everything, Rosaline's betrayal, my disappearance, my wandering, the years I spent hiding from life. He listened without judgment. When I finished, he simply said, so what now? I want to meet my daughter. But I don't want to hurt her. He rubbed his beard. Then maybe it's time she knows the truth. Carefully. With Father Benedict's help, I wrote her a letter. We gave it to the seminarian to deliver to her, with strict instructions not to force anything. Whether she responded or not, I had done something I should have done years ago. 3 days passed. Then came a knock on my door. I opened it slowly. Standing there was a girl in jeans and a school bag. Her eyes, mine. Her brows, Rosaline's. She looked at me for a long time. You're the man from the letter? She asked. Yes, I replied, my throat dry. You're my father. Yes. She didn't cry. She didn't hug me. She simply said, why? And for the first time in years, I had to open my mouth and speak the truth. Not excuses. Not blame. Just the truth. We sat outside a quiet cafe. I ordered her a drink, but she didn't touch it. Her eyes never left mine. You left, she said flatly. Mom said you died in an accident. I blinked. She told you that? She nodded. I believed her. For years. Then, one day, I overheard something. That you had run away. That you found out about her and Uncle Steve. I looked down at my hands. They trembled slightly. I didn't want to believe it, she continued. But then I started wondering, if you were alive, why didn't you come back? I couldn't answer immediately. I was broken, I finally said. I thought leaving would fix something. I didn't know it would break more than it healed. She looked at me like someone trying to recognize a face from a dream. So, why now? Because silence didn't give me peace, I said. It only gave me regrets. The next few days were quiet between us. She didn't tell her mother. I didn't ask her to. We walked around Abuja sometimes, her asking questions about my life, my disappearance. I told her the truth, nothing fancy, nothing exaggerated. Just a man who ran and finally decided to stop running. But the one place I never went back to was the house. One evening, we stood across the street, staring at it. She pointed toward the window. "That's her room now," she said. "She cries a lot at night." I nodded but said nothing. "You're not going in?" "No," I replied. "There's nothing for me inside that house anymore." She came again the next weekend. This time, she brought a scrapbook. Photos of her as a baby, a child, a girl growing into herself. "I thought you should see what you missed," she said. Her voice wasn't bitter. It was just honest. I flipped through the pictures, my hands shaking. Her first birthday. Her graduation from primary school. Her high jump medal. I wiped my eyes. "Do you hate me?" I asked quietly. She thought for a long time before answering. "No. I just don't fully know you yet. But I'm willing to try, if you are." Weeks passed, and we settled into a rhythm. She would visit every Saturday. Sometimes for lunch, sometimes to sit in silence. We talked about school, music, and her dreams. She wanted to be a writer. "I like stories," she said one afternoon. "Even the painful ones. They teach us something." I looked at her and smiled. "So do I." She didn't call me Dad. Not yet. She called me Sir sometimes, or just Uncle. And that was okay. We were starting from scratch, like building a house with ashes and clay. But it wasn't always smooth. One day she arrived with swollen eyes. Her mother had found out. There had been shouting. Accusations. Regrets thrown around like weapons. "She thinks you came to steal me," she cried. "I'm not here to steal anything," I said. "Only to be here if you choose." She told me you were weak. That you ran away instead of fighting for us. I took a deep breath. She's not wrong. I did run. But not everything is that simple. She looked at me. "I know." I told her I still want to see you. She didn't stop me. That was enough. One morning, I received a letter. It was from Roseline. "Justin, you were right to go. Some ghosts don't rest unless faced. I'm leaving too. Going back to my hometown. Maybe it's time I stop hiding too. Thank you for reminding me I still exist. Roseline." I smiled and folded the paper carefully. She was another chapter one would remember, not with longing, but with gratitude. We were both wanderers who met at the crossroads of pain. On her 16th birthday, I surprised her with a handwritten journal and a small cake. She laughed. "You baked?" "No, I paid someone. But I chose the icing myself." She laughed again. As we ate, she looked up suddenly and said, "Dad." I froze. She looked away quickly, embarrassed. "Sorry. It just came out." My throat tightened. "It's okay. You can call me anything." "No," she said softly. "I think I want to call you that." In that moment, I didn't feel like a man who had lost 15 years. I felt like a father beginning at year 1. Months passed. She graduated secondary school. I sat in the crowd, away from her mother, watching quietly as she received her award for literature. She caught my eye and smiled. I waved. It was enough. Her mother never acknowledged me. I didn't expect her to. We didn't reconcile. There were no teary apologies. No courtroom drama. Just silence. And sometimes, silence is a boundary. Not all fences are meant to be broken. We stood by a lake one evening, the sunset bleeding into the water. "Will you ever go back to your old name?" she asked. I shook my head. "That man died a long time ago." She nodded. "But a new one rose from the ashes." "Yes," I said. "And he's still learning how to live." She held my hand lightly. We both are. And in that quiet, I realized, sometimes what breaks you is also what brings you back to life. Moral lesson. The past does not always return to be fixed. Sometimes it returns to be faced, to be accepted, and to be laid to rest. Not all broken things need to be repaired, some just need to be understood.